Okay, so basically, like basically, 1 second, sorry. Basically, a class is like so I think it's hard to describe exactly what an abstract class is, because you can't really instantiate an abstract class. So let me give you an example. If someone told you to, I think a proper rebuttal question would be, which vegetable do you want me to draw? It's basically with Java, Kotlin, any programming language. When you specify something that's really abstract or is a broader category, something that isn't specified in the programming language will ask you to specify further what exactly you mean by that. So for example, if you told Kotlin to create a vegetable, it would ask you which vegetable. And this is where subclasses come in. Subclasses are basically more specific versions of the parent class. They are much clearer. You can like visualize them essentially in terms of programming language. And they have properties that are shared among their parent class. So, for example, all vegetables share the common properties of is edible, color. So all vegetables have are either edible or inedible. They have a color, they have a size, they have a texture. These things are all common among all vegetables. However, as soon as you specialize into a smaller subclass of vegetables, all of a sudden new properties come into play. So for example, legumes, I'm not really sure what that is, honestly, but it might be, it might be grown in a certain area. It might be resistant to the cold. It might, all these things that might be specific only to a legume. Same thing with lentils and chickpeas. Lentils may have properties and functions that are specific only to them. Same thing with chickpeas. However, they do share all the properties of legumes and vegetables. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that okay? Okay, feel free to stop me if you have any questions. It works the same way with Kotlin. Oh, thank you. It works the same way with Kotlin Kotlin components. I guess we should call them UI components. So if you have a view, like again, Kotlin will ask you what type of view do you want. You'll have to specify because there are multiple types of views that exist in the world. There's a text view, there's an image view, and so on and so forth. So this abstract class will give the properties that exist within itself to its children, and the children will add on new properties and new functions. They may or may not add on new properties and new functions, but it can be visualized by the programming language itself, and so on and so forth. So for example, as soon as you have an text view, you can further specialize that into two types of subviews, subclasses, such as edit text component and then the button component. Now these are different from each other and they will share some properties with each other, but they are not necessarily identical because some properties are different than the other. So they'll have some stuff in common, but something will be different between these two to make it a separate class. Okay. So now let's get started. So I posted this in the link. And today I'll post it again just in case, but today we'll be getting started on pathway 1 and pathway 2. So if you open the link, I think you should see, let me just open that link myself. That way. Oops, there we go. Bring this over here. So you should see, I lost the screen, hang on, whoops. Like this, and if you click on New to Programming, you can click on Start Course, and see, and if you click Explore, you should be able to see like all the pathways that we're supposed to be covering. So my goal for today is for us to finish at least the first one, so we'll have that functioning app. Pathway 2, I guess I can leave to you. or for, I guess, personalizing that application to make it more user-friendly and pretty. It will just be things like changing themes and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get started on that. Click on explore. I'll do this with you guys. I'll do the first pathway with you guys, simply because I think it can get a little hairy, and it might be easier to see this in live time, real time. But if you ever want to go ahead and finish everything on your own, that's perfectly okay too. You don't need to stick to my pace. But for those of you that want to stick to this, you're more than welcome to. Okay, so these are both videos, and they're basically talking about what we, which for those who are just joining, we just want to make a tip calculator that looks something like this. Okay, so, you know, we type in the amount of however much we paid for whatever service we were, I don't know, participating in. Say we eat a meal was $100, and we want to give a tip that was dependent on how the service was. If the service was just good, and we click calculate, we give a tip of $18. If it was amazing, $20. And if we wanted to round up the tip, basically what that means is, let's say $93, I don't know, and we typed in calculate, it would round up to the nearest dollar. So we're basically just adding these seemingly simplistic features into this application, but it gets a little murky, but we should be able to, hopefully. All right. So classes and inheritance, I mentioned just before. So we just talked about that, so I won't touch on that again. But basically, we need, for those that just joined, maybe or you know what, I think it should be all right. If we come across it, I'll deal with it. So I think it should be a good idea for us to talk about creating the XML layout for Android. So let's start here. And please do let me know if I'm going a little too fast. You don't have to really, I'll try to summarize everything that's on the screen. Let me see if I can make this bigger too. Yeah, there we go. Hopefully that should be large enough for you guys as well. And also feel free to stop me at any time in the chat if you have any questions. So again, I guess task, we're just going to be understanding more about XML layouts in Android and how to manipulate that to our advantage. So let's start the project. Oh, actually, before we start the project, let me open up Android Studio. Let's do that together. If you open up Android Studio and you click on File, New Project, you should be able to get the screen, and then you can just click on Empty Activity and click on and let's call it time. Okay. So my tip time is over here. There it is. And you should basically see a screen like this. Right now it's just loading, but you'll see a bunch of directories and files in those directories that pop up. Yeah. And just as a recap for last time, basically all of your UI elements, your UI design will be going in this resource package under layout, under activity_main.xml. So whatever you want our screen to look like, all the design. In terms of the logic, like for example, if you have a button in the screen and you want to click it, you want something to happen once the button is clicked, that logic, it will go inside this main activity.kt. Okay. So all your logic is in this file, and then all your design elements, all your stuff will be in the activity.main.xml and under the layouts of resources. Okay. All right. So now that we have a project, This is basically just talking about what we just did. So we made an empty project, empty activity project. The next thing we're going to be talking about is reading and understanding XML. So XML is basically a way to visualize data in a either a browser or a screen. It's a way to you can use it in code, or I guess Android provides it. Yeah, so you can either drag components onto the screen, or you could see that those same components encode themselves like that. And the important thing to know about with XML is basically it runs on the premise that boxes exist within boxes that exist within boxes. It's all about hierarchies. It's all about belonging to a certain container. So for example, if this is your root node of your screen, basically it's talking about the entire container. And then the next level is how you divide that large container into smaller boxes. So for example, if I were to divide this screen into smaller boxes, I could maybe make this screen into like a navigation. I could make this into another box, and I can make this into another box, and then just add things into those boxes and build my UI that way. It works the same way here with XML. Basically, you have a root node, and within that root node, you have smaller boxes within that larger box, and then within those smaller boxes you specify exactly what you wanted to display. So that's exactly just what this is showing here. So the one that we're going to be working with today is called a constraint layout, and basically what it is it's the screen here, right here. It's basically saying that the box encompasses the whole screen size. Okay. And then when you put something inside that box, how it defines the position of the box within is by how far the box within should be from the top and from the sides and from the bottom. So for example, here, if I look at Hello World, basically it's saying that it's completely centered from the top and bottom borders, so vertically centered, and it's centered horizontally from the left and right edges. You see those squiggly lines? That's basically saying, it's basically saying that within this screen, it's completely centered. And if I were to change this, so if I were to make the constraint 10 instead, basically what it's saying, from the top of the screen, we're adding a 10 margin here, meaning that we're going to add a little bit of space to the top. Okay. So, and this is what it basically looks like in code. Within your outer box, you have an inner element, and within that inner element, you have to set exactly the location of where it belongs inside the box and inside the outer box. Okay. So that's exactly what we're doing here. And we saw this in code too. So let me open up the code view again, just to show you what it looked like. So this is our outer box, and this is our inner box. It might be easier to also see with indentation here. Okay. All right. Moving forward. Let's see here. Okay. Now, each of those elements has a property. So if we go here, each of any element really that's going to be on your app screen is going to have a specific property. Is going to have specific properties, I should say, not a specific property, but it will have multiple properties in which you can use to specify exactly how you want to display that element. So for example, there's a property in the text view called text, and this basically specifies what you want your text view or that element to say. So if I wanted to change this to, I don't know, Happy Sunday, smiley face. And I saved it. If we look at what it looks like on the screen, we'll change to Happy Sunday. And so on and so on. Okay. I don't want this marking, so I'm just going to take it out. Oops, wrap content. There we go. Okay, so these individual properties just basically specify another way, another design element of that specific element. Okay. And that's basically all this is talking about here. So let's copy this button here and add it into our own project. So I'm going to add it right on. Oh, and you also have to import things as they come. So if you see this error, oh, okay, no, never mind. Let's just add those things. Wrap content. Oops. There we go. It's still upset. I'll fix that in a second. Wrap content. Oh no, what now? Okay, let's see what the Android Studio says about that. Okay, it's just talking about, I don't know why it's mad, honestly, but it worked yesterday. Okay, let's see if it's showing up here. Weirdly, it is. Okay, let's see the error here. Ah, I see. That's why it's upset. Because we're working in a constraint layout, so I told you the outer box is called a constraint layout, right? Basically, what this means is that any child element has to be defined. We have to tell it where we want to put it inside that larger outside box, right? And because this isn't defined, this position isn't defined, we just kind of toss it in there and we just said, okay, do with it what you will. It's upset because it's like it doesn't know where to put it. So let's tell it where to put it. So I'll do this actually in the properties. I'll just do it here. I'll move this like this. And then I'll make these zeros. Should be all right there. All right. Oh, not 291, 0. So another fun thing, if you put left and the right, or if you put 0 on both the top and the bottom, it basically just centers it respectively to where you put the 0. So for example, if I put the 0 on the left and the right, it centers the element horizontally. If I put zeros on the top and the bottom, it would center it vertically. And the way you can tell this on the screen is by those squiggly lines that you see there. They're very pale, but I guess you can see them on this one. All right, let's go to the next part. And then this here is just talking about how you make a comment in XML. So if you worked with HTML, it starts with the exclamation mark dash dash. It looks cool. I like it. And now let's talk about building the layout in XML. Okay. All right. So let's work. Yeah, let's do the split screen thing here. Oopsie. There we go. Split screen. Split screen. So basically, you could see both the coding view of this and then also the design view of it. So you'll be able to see any property that you update in real time on the right. Okay. And I'll remove that button for now. I guess we'll just keep it even with Android Studio. All right. So the first thing it tells us to do is to remove that text view. So you can do this in one of two ways. And anything that belongs to this text view, just go in and delete it, or you can click on this here, right click it and click delete. I'm going to do for today, just because the pathways really emphasize working with the code. I'll try and do everything in the code, but if you ever feel uncomfortable with it, feel free to go back into the design view. Okay, so basically what we have left in the design view is just this, correct? You know what? I think I'll move this back. What's going on here? And then I'll just keep that open for you guys. And then I'll do things in real time. So the next thing it's telling us to do is to add padding to the constraint layout so that everything inside in this outer box basically pushes everything inside by a little bit of space, just so that it doesn't crowd the screen. So let's go ahead and do that. And the way we do that is by adding, oops, sorry, 1 second. I'll just fix this. Okay, yeah, the way we do that is just by going to the parent box, and then adding a property that tells the programming, the IDE, add a little bit of space in between all the child elements of this outer box. So let's go ahead and do that. So the property that we're going to be adding is Android, not caps, Android colon padding, and should be equals, and then within quotations 16 dp. Okay, and then click save. And that should be really all for right now in terms of that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try and add this part of the app. Right, oops, let me take that out. This part of the app. So just like the text box right over there. So the first thing we're going to do, let's go here. Okay. We're going to add an edit text element. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing that out. Text and automatic properties that Kotlin needs in order to create this element. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and put in wrap content. And basically what this means is that the size of this element will resize depending on what's being typed in there. So if you have like 3 sentences, it will expand. If you have two same thing this way, so height, it will adjust itself to the size of the text. And then we also have to add in an input type. So let's go ahead and do that. So for now, I'm going to put in, not input method, input type. If you have the pathways open, you can just copy and paste this. Okay. I'm just going to put the input type as text. And then I'm going to close the tag. And it's mad at me because, again, I didn't tell Kotlin where to put it inside the outside box. That's fine. We'll go ahead and fix that right now. So I think last time when we worked with this, we didn't work with the coding portion. We worked in terms of this design part of it. Like we did all the constraints here. This week, let's try working with the coding component. So basically how you do this is you add a property into the coding component called layout and constraint start. And what this means so far is that the property of edit text, where it starts, we want to pin it to the start of, and then that's where we specify the element. And in our case, we want to pin it to the top of parent. So basically what it's saying is to right. So in our case, because we read left to right, it will pin it to the left edge of the parent. However, the parent has 16 DPs of padding. It pushes everything in by 16 DPs. And so it will start exactly there. So how cool is that? Now we want to also constrain this vertically, right? The way we do that is basically the same way. We go app, oops, I don't know what I clicked there. App layout constraint top. So what we're saying right now is we want the top of this element, the top of edit text, to be top of, and in our case, the parent element, again, the outside box. And again, there's going to be a 16 DP space in between. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Okay. Yes. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. All right. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about, let's see here. It says that okay, the next is change this input. Because we are working with numbers here, sense to keep this as a string, because that way people can words and stuff. It doesn't make any sense. So we want to keep it as a number. If we go here and we start typing in, we see number decimal, and this one is important just because it will it limits like all inputs to numbers with decimals. Okay, so that way, if I type in 10, it would automatically take it as 10.0, and so on and so forth. Okay. And the next thing we want to add to this is to add a hint. And what this hint is basically it's like light place that tells what to input into the text. How we do this is we go Android :hint. And then for our example, we're using, what was it? Cost of service? Yeah, cost of service. So the hint looks like that. So let's go. Cost of service. Okay. And it expands just like that. Okay, so super cool. We basically gotten the first element down. So now the next is add the next element. So we want to add in this, how was the service? And this is different from cost of service because we're not changing this text. It's always going to be the same. That we determine. So let's go ahead and add that in. So that's going to be a text view in Kotlin. Text view. Okay. And automatically it's asking me for random things. Again, and for those of you that are wondering how I did this autofill thing, I just click tab on my computer. Okay, and so we have, and I can go ahead and close that. And again, it's going to be mad at me because I didn't tell it where to be positioned within this screen. So let's go ahead. Right now, oh, and also let me set the text for this as well. So I'll set the text first so we can see it on the design screen. So let's go Android text, and let's set it to how was the service. Yeah, and right now, if we look at the app, it's like, it's kind of floating around. Kotlin doesn't really know where to put it, so it just goes with 0, 0. Put it right under this we just added. Let's go ahead and do that. Is with colon layout constraint start. And so what that means is we're taking the start, the left side of this element, and we're pinning it to, oh, sorry, I didn't. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Ram. Yeah, that's exactly right. So for WAS, you can just go in and see like the first 2 study gems so that you can go back and review those as well. Okay. Again, so you're going to start the left side of this to the left side of the parent. Yes. Hang on, let me see if I can pull that up for you. Part of the channel? Are you part of the GDSC group? Thank you. That made my life easier. Okay. So again, we want to pin this left edge of the screen, the parent screen. However, we want to pin this top to the top to the bottom of this element that we just added. So the way we're going to do that is oops. So we're going to layout constraint we're talking about the top of this element, and we want to pin it to the bottom of, and we're going to talk about how do we that we want to pin it to the bottom of this one. The way basically finding the ID this element here and then putting it within the text. We're basically identifying this and telling Kotlin of that element that we just identified. Let's see how to do that. Now, this ID, so if we look at design and we click on, it doesn't have an ID, so let's give it an ID, okay? So let's call it cost of this. Perfect. And now if we go back into the code, we can see it is given an ID of cost of service. So now, if ever we want to identify this in the code itself, we just this ID badge essentially and put it wherever it is that we. In our case, we want to pin this element to the bottom of this element. We just say that ID. We'd say at ID and then give the ID name, cost of service, and automatically it will know to be pinned to the bottom of that element. So pretty cool. And then let's also go ahead and add an ID to this text view because we're going to keep on adding things to the bottom. Okay, so let's add an ID here. So when you first add an ID or when it's first being used, you have to add a plus sign and then the ID. Let's call this one service question. And so now if we go back to the design, we can see that its ID is service question. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next task that we have. And then I think we can take a little break after that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add these radio buttons. So radio buttons, they typically work within a radio group. So basically how you'd make this work is you'd have an outer group that says, hey, I want to have some radio buttons. And then each of those buttons themselves would be an element called radio button. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's add our radio group. I think wrap content and wrap content. Let's go ahead and close that. Now, the interesting to note about this is the way that you want to close it is with actually an angle bracket and then the closing tag at the end, like that. Like before we closed it all in one line, we don't want to do that here because we have to add things in between, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the next thing that we're supposed to do. So for right now in the here at number 5, it seems that we have a lot of things to add. So we have the width, the height, the orientation. So let's go ahead and do that. And basically, we're telling our radio group that we want all the radio buttons to be oriented vertically, right? We want them to be lined up, stacked on top of. That's how we do it with vertical. We also want to constrain it. Right now it's mad at us because it doesn't know where to go. So let's go ahead and constrain it. So let's go Android layout. Sorry, it was app layout. App layout. Constraint start. So the left side, we want to pin it to the start of the parent again. And the right side and the top layout constraint top. We want to pin it to the top of, to the bottom of the element that we just created, which was the service question right here. So we want to copy this and put this in the ID here. There we go. So automatically it knows to go to the to be pinned to the bottom of that element over there. Okay. All right. Is there anything else that we have to do here? Oh, just adding an ID. So let's go ahead and add that. So Android ID is equal to, and then the first time we're using it, so we're going to have the plus ID and underscore options. So let's call it that. Options. Oops. Options. There we go. Yes, and I think that's about it that we need for that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is define each and every single radio button within this group. So radio button, so let's go ahead and add that element, radio button. And again, it's going to ask us how we want the size to be. We want to wrap the content. So already it's added that little bubble thing. We also want to add the text, so what we want the option to say. And so for the first element, for the first radio button, we wanted to say amazing. All right, so let's go here, say text, amazing, 20%. And then we also want, let's go ahead and give this, I'll put the ID at the top there. So Android ID is equal, and the first time we're using it again, so at plus ID slash, and let's call this one, I think it's, yeah, okay, option 20%. 20%. Okay. There we go. And now we see it's there. Oh, and I didn't close this as well. Just give that a quick close. And so we have our first radio button there. So it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and add the other two radio buttons and then take a break. So I can just copy and paste this and then change all the properties. For this one, we are going to actually make it 18%. 18%. And we want the text to be, I think, good. Yeah, good. Perfect. And then this one, we want it to be 15%. So let's just change that 15. Everything else is the same. Okay. 15%. There we go. So as of right now, we have this element, the text label, the radio buttons. They're all created. I think it's a good point to take a little bit of a break. So I'll pause the recording for about, 10 minutes, let's say. 10 minutes. Let's reconvene at 1:10. 12 minutes. So at 1:10, I'll start the recording again. But until then, let's just pause for a little. Okay, see you at 1:10. All right. And just to confirm, everyone can hear me, right? I'm not just speaking to myself, am I? I'll put that in the chat as well, just in case. Hello? Okay. All right, we have a yes. Okay, I'll take it. So the next step that we're going to do, so right now, oopsie. 1 second. Oh, there we go. Okay, so right now, if we run this app, so let me just run it, pull this up. It's going to take a second. Basically, what we're going to be seeing is none of the options are going to be selected. I wonder why it's taking a while. Oh, yeah, probably because it's the first time running. All right, so there we go. So nothing is selected. We want to have something automatically selected when we run this app. So we're going to add that in right now. And basically what you do is you go to the radio group and you add in a property that tells it, hey, I want this, but no, this automatically would check by default. So let's go ahead and do that then. So in radio group, we're going to go in and add in a property called Android checked button. And then we're going to specify the ID for it. So we're going to say at ID. And in our case, we want option 20% to be automatically selected. Okay, so this time, if we rerun the app, we can see that automatically be selected. I didn't do anything. It's already there. Okay, so now going into the next component, take time test. Yeah, so this label right over here. So round tip, and this it's called a switch, I guess, this toggle thing. In Kotlin, it's called a switch. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay. So let's see here. So let's go add in a switch element after this radio group. Like that. All right. Call the switch. Let's add that in. And again, I don't like this. I want it to be like this. Switch. Let me redo that. Hang on one second. So let me type in switch. This is exactly what I want. I don't know why it's getting mad. Okay, I think I have to. There we go. It's just upset about the properties. So we have a switch. We want to change the height again to wrap content. So we want it to be automatically resized. Same thing with the width. Again, wrap content. We want it to be automatically resized. The other thing that we want to add, of course, is the ID. So let's go ahead and add that in. Android ID. And it's again the first time we're defining it. So a @ plus ID slash, and then let's call this round switch. Right. All right. Okay, so we have it identified. We have the sizes. Sizes checked. Actually, let's make the width instead of wrap content. Let's make it 0 dp. So as of right now, it's not gonna take up any space. We'll fix that soon. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's go here. Let's click in Android checked. Let's set it to true. So that just means it's going to be toggled on by default. Okay. And as you see, it's up there, toggled on. And let's set the text of it. And I think it was what, round up tip, round up tip, round up tip, round up tip. There we go. And do you see how the width, there's no, like, it just takes up exactly what it's supposed to take up. It doesn't go further or less. That's about to be changed, I think. So let's first of all pin this exactly to where we want this location. So in terms of left and right, we want the left edge of this element to be bound to the left edge or the start of the parent element. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, app layout constraint start. We want the start of our element to be pinned to the start of the parent element. Okay. And then same thing with the top too. Now let's go ahead. We want this top. We want this top to be pinned to the bottom of the radio group element, which is defined as tip option. So let's go ahead and pin that. App layout constraint top. And we want that to be pinned to the bottom of at ID, and it was, what was it? Tip options. Tip underscore options. Automatically it moves down. Okay. Huh. Not sure what happened. Like on my end, it looked like everything was going perfectly fine, but I guess not. Okay. Anyways, I guess now that we're back online, we can continue. Sorry, one second. We can continue with the presentation. What was the last thing you guys heard? Was it the button or the switch? Switch. Okay, perfect. So I'll just go remove button and then we can take it from there. Okay. So in terms of our UI, we just want to add in the next element, which in our case is going to be a button and called calculate. So let's go ahead and add that in. So 10. And then automatically it adds in those things. We want the layout to be, the width to be 0 dp, and the height to be wrap content. And there are other properties that we need to look at as well. So for example, we want to give this an ID. So let's go ahead and do that. Android ID, and then at plus ID. Let's call this the calculate button. Okay. And then we want to set the text for this button as well. So Android text, and we wanted to say calculate equals calculate. There we go. And then now let's position this within the UI. Okay, so we want, in terms of left to right, we want the left edge to be pinned to the start of the parent edge on the left. So let's go do that. App layout constraint start. The start, and we want start element. Okay, and
In terms of vertical positioning, we want this top edge over here to be pinned to the bottom of this element up here, up to the element of the switch.
So to do that, we're going to say app layout constraint top, the top of the element we're talking about, the button, and we want to pin it to the bottom of at ID, and it is the switch, which is the round up switch. Automatically it's positioned there. Now, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why it's not interpreting the 0dp as like 0dp on either ends. So like if we go to the design, remember how I told you that in order to center this, or in order for the full space of the width, it needs to be 0 on either end. It's not interpreting that as 0dp. So I'll just have to manually do that there. Click enter. There we go. Now it takes up the full width. So if you're having that issue, just make sure you go into the design. In terms of the code, though, nothing changes. I think that's just a default issue. Okay. All right. So now that we have, I think this basically covers, oh no, there's one more part of the UI we need to add. We just need to add in this tiny, tiny text over there. It's a text label. So we can go ahead and do that. I think it's a text view. Yeah, text view that we're adding. Okay, so let's go and add that in now. Text view. And then again, layout width. We want this to be wrap content. We want it to change its size depending on the text. Same thing with the height. We also need to give this an ID. So an ID of at plus ID of tip underscore result, because the text will change depending on the calculations that happen. Okay, and then we want to, let's change the text for now. Android text is equal to tip amount. And let's just leave it at that for now. That will change down the road. Change the position. So in terms of left to right positioning, we want to pin the left edge of this element to the left edge of the parent. So again, we're going to do app layout constraint and start. We want to pin the left edge, so the start of it, to the start of the parent element. So automatically it's pinned left. Oopsie. All right, there we go. And then we just need to position this vertically. So for this element, we want the top of this element to be pinned to the bottom of the calculate button. So we're going to do this app constraint, constraint, the top. We're talking about the top of this element, and we want it to be pinned to the bottom of this ID here, calculate button. So add ID slash, there you go, and automatically it moves down, right? Now, let's see here. Is there anything else that we have to do? So for whatever reason, it's being pinned. It's supposed to be pinned onto the left side, onto the right side. So let me see if I can change that here in the design component. That's why, again, always 0. Let me take that out. Let me take this out as well. It should be wrap content. Let me just fix that, sorry, real quick. Wrap content. Sorry, let me just go back and repin that. I can actually probably copy it here. It has the same code. Yeah, there we go. So it's pinned. Oh, actually, that's the problem. That's my bad. We're not pinning this start. Let me go back here. I'll pull this back here for a second. Sorry, that's my bad. We're not pinning the start of this edge to, like, if we look at the UI here, we're pinning actually this edge to the right edge of the parent. So we're pinning the end of this element to the end of the parent element. So let's change that. That's exactly what the issue was. App layout. So again, the end of the element we're talking about, so this tip amount, and we want to pin it to the end of the parent element. So that should push it all the way to the right. Okay. And then we can run the app, and I think that should cover about all the UI components that we need to think about for this app. So I'll just let it build. Yeah. And so in terms of the UI, it looks exactly the same. What we're missing right now is just functionality. So nothing happens when I click the calculate button. There's no dynamic population of the text here. I think I can type in something, but still nothing happens. Good thing about this though is I can't type in any letters. So yay number decimal system for text input. Okay. So moving on, that about covers, I think, the XML coding practices. So if we look at the pathway itself, we should be done with the design portion of it. The next thing we want to look at is the logic portion of it. So we want to make sure that the numbers actually work. So in order to do this, we're going to follow this task right over here, and we're going to take the code lab for it. So I'm going to restart here. And the same thing, the only prerequisite to this is that we have the UI built, which we already do. And what we're going to do here is we're going to now work in this main activity.kt and make the app functional in terms of, yeah, we're just going to make it be able to calculate the tip based on whatever service quantity we provided. Okay, so let's get started on that. Let's see what else it says over here. I think this is just a review for right now. Yes. And this is basically talking about the structure of Android applications. So right now we're in Android view. You can also change it to project view if you want to see more files. I like this one. It's more streamlined. And basically we have a couple of files that we want to look at here. So as I mentioned before, all your coding logic will go into main activity. All your design stuff will be under resources. And if you have more than one, design or layout, you can put them all within your resources. These are all static, meaning that they don't, like, no logic effect, like logic will affect them. What is displayed will be changed depending on the logic, but this in and of itself exists regardless of the logic. Okay, so like images, that will go in here, values, that will go in here, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is our logic, this is our design. Okay, and there's one more file that we want to talk about here. So strings.xml. So this is kind of like, I like to think of it as variables. Okay, when we are coding here, whenever we're setting up coding the values inside, so the button is calculate. I don't know, the switch is round up tip. We're actually typing in these things here. But realistically speaking, if we want this app to be translated into multiple languages or, just something like that, the best way to implement this type of thing would be actually to have the name of a variable here. And this variable would correspond with a line in this code, and basically it could go in and translate based on whatever is being inputted here. So I'll give you an example of what this means. One second, I'll just pull this up here. Let's go here. Let's go fix all these. So as you see here, we have like a bunch of caution signs, because we're hard coding all the values in here. I don't know why that's mad at me. I'll just ignore that one, ignore this one, and ignore this one. That's fine. Oopsie, ignore. Okay, great. So these values have hard coded text. Okay, now there's a way to fix them. If you, I don't want this. So if I click on this here, cost of service. Oh no, that's fine. For now, that's fine. Let's go to service question here. This text is hard coded into the code view right there. Right here. How was the service? So if we were to translate that, it wouldn't work as nicely. So let's fix that right now. So if I click on the error, it will show me a window here. I'll make this bigger. It will say hard-coded text. Now, if you click on fix, you can just basically name the resource that you want to change it. Like just, I like to think of this as a variable. So
It's fine. And then you can just set it
set the resource value to whatever you want the string to say. And if you click OK, it will appear in the strings.xml. This was the name that we gave it in terms of the variable, and this is the text. So now if we want to change the text, we can just go in this and change it that way. So it's just like a list of all of them. So now, since we're here, might as well change all of them. So let's fix this. Let's call this amazing service. An amazing 2020 is fine. Let me change this one as well. Let's call this good service. Let's call this OK service. Oops, service. Let's call this calculate. That should be fine. And call this tip amount. Okay, there's still some hard-coded text. Let's just fix this as well. Round up tip. Okay. And here we go. Cost of service. Okay, so now we've dramatically decreased the caution signs that we're getting here. And now if we look at, we have a bunch of resource names and then the actual string, like the strings that we want to be, we wanted to actually say. Okay. All right. So now the next thing I want to talk about is view binding. So honestly, I read this earlier and I kind of struggled with understanding the concepts. Like it's kind of complicated, not really complicated. It's convoluted, I should say. It's more like muddled in terms of understanding. It's not like super straightforward. But basically, all this to say, like before, if you wanted to find any element within your UI, you'd have to do find view by ID, and it didn't matter how many like containers you had. Like even if you had like a constraint layout within a constraint layout within a constraint layout, one of those elements, and then regardless of hierarchy, and then find the button. Programmatically, this is a very long process. It doesn't make much sense to do that. So there's something that you can do called view binding, and what it does is it takes more work up front. It does take more work up front, but if you do it, you can just refer to elements based on its relationship to the root. So for example, before, let me see here. Yeah, there we go. Before, if you wanted to find a button and apply logic to it, you'd have to go val button, and then you'd have to find it by ID, and like it would take a little bit longer to find it because it's going through all the elements within the UI design. However, if you apply this view binding, all you'd have to do, instead of writing find view by ID, you just have to write binding my button. And so it knows to look for my button within the binding, which is the root element or the root constraint layout. And there's an easier path to it. And so it's just mildly faster, I should say. And also faster for you because you're coding this, and this logic is, this is much shorter than find view by ID each and every single time. So let's go ahead and enable this view binding. So I'll move this over here. Okay. So the way we enable this is, first of all, we open up the Gradle scripts, and we're going to open up build Gradle, but the module one. So if we click on this right there, then we are going to add in the following lines. So we're going to type in the Android section, we're going to say build features, and then we're going to have some curly braces there, and we're going to say view binding is equal to true. Okay. We're going to save it. And then it's going to say, basically, the Gradle files have changed, blah, 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 blah. We want to click on sync now. And it will take, I think, a couple minutes, but all in all, it should be there. Yeah, it should be good now. So now, whenever I refute, sorry, what's the word for that? I'm Sunday morning brain. Whenever I'm trying to refer to an object, I'll never have to write find view by ID. I can just say binding dot and whatever ID my object has in this layout here. So for example, if I wanted to refer to this, I could just write binding dot and this ID cost of service, and I'd automatically get a reference to that element within my UI. Okay. So now let's move on to, oh, there's more things that we have to do. So this is just the first part. We also have to initialize the binding object. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's open main activity.kt. Let me move that over there. Main activity.kt. And within, I'm going to delete everything within this class. And I'll post this in the chat as well, so you don't, just in case you want to use it. There you go. But basically, we're just going to replace all the class, the whole class, with the text that I posted within the chat. Okay, so I'm going to remove this. Oopsie. I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to paste that one in there as well. And automatically, the import should happen. If they don't, you can just go ahead and manually do those as well. All right. And basically, there's some coding magic that goes on here. This is basically setting up that binding element. It's basically saying binding is the root of your, of the UI, so that whenever you want to refer to an element within the object, you can just use that binding, this notation, binding my button, like that. Okay, cool. So now let's go on to the next one, and let's actually implement the object. Implement the logic behind this tip. Okay, so let's open up main activity.kt. Again, all your app logic will go in this file. Okay, and let's see what we have to do. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to add in a listener for our button. So first of all, let's find our button. So our button here, it has the ID of calculate button. So let's go ahead and close that Gradle. We don't need that anymore. So within class and main activity, in on create, so within this, but after the set content view, let's add a listener to our calculate button. So I'm going to say binding dot and calculate button. There it is. And then let's say set on click listener. Oh, sorry, not those. We want curly brackets.
A method called calculate tip. Now this method doesn't exist yet, but we'll create it.
So let's go outside the on create, and let's implement a function called calculate tip. So fun calculate tip, and we're going to add those parentheses and the curly braces. Okay. So for right now, you should be seeing about the same thing as me. Everyone with me so far? All good? I'll take silence. Yes. Okay. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is find the logic for this. So let's create a variable. within the calculate tip, and let's say val, oops, not cal, val string in text field. So let's call it that. And let's set it to binding cost of service, which is our edit text element right here. It's this one right there. And then let's say the text. Okay, so we want to set this this variable to whatever text is being inputted into that element. Okay. Oh, can you explain what Gradle files are and what their purpose is? Also, why two Gradle files, module and project? Okay, so I'm not 100% well versed on exactly their individual roles, but collectively, these are what help builds your application on the app. So whenever you click run, that's the stuff that's happening in the background to display your application on the Android phone emulator. Okay. I'm not sure what the difference between these two are. Okay, it looks like this is just dependencies. Yeah, so I think they both realistically hold dependencies. They're just holding different types of dependencies. Yeah, because these look like if you've ever used Spring Boot, it looks like that I forgot what it's called now. But there's like a file that has all the dependencies and I guess plugins. It's the same. It basically takes your code, compiles it, and puts it on. Okay, so I'll close these both for now. Right. All right. So going back here, so we're just taking the text of that text of edit text component, and we're putting it into a variable. Okay. And notice that this is the text part, right? So we're taking that of this element, and we're implementing the value of that property into this variable. Okay. So now let's go ahead and add another variable as well. So let's go add val cost is equal to string in text field, and then we're going to change this to double. So we're just going to take that text, we're going to take that string, parse it into a double value like this. Okay. Now notice that there's an error here. It's mad, and that's because this text could be anything. It really could be. It could be like it doesn't understand that this text, like we declared this edit text value as a number decimal. So if we go back to our code here, we said this edit text component was going to have an input type of number decimal. We declared that, but for Kotlin, it doesn't communicate the input type at all. It just automatically assumes that whatever input is in the text is going to be automatically a string. And so we have to tell Kotlin, hey, it's actually a number that we're trying to parse into a double. It's not just any random string. Oh, sorry, actually, no, that's not exactly what's happening. Text right now is a type of object called editable. It's not a string yet, but it will be if we add it to string. So there we go. So we're taking this editable object and we're making it a string. And then we're parsing that string into a double. Okay, great. Now, let's see the next thing that we're going to be working on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to try and figure out which of the clicked. So we're going to see which one has been selected. Okay. So the way we do that, radio button selected. All right. So now let's see here. The way we do that, let's set a variable and let's call it selected ID. Okay. And let's set it to the binding dot and tip options, which is our radio group ID right there. And then we are going to change it. We're going to see which one is selected. So we're going to say checked radio button ID. And what this does is it basically goes through all the radio buttons within the radio group, the tip options radio group, and it sees which button is checked. And since the radio buttons, only one is really selected. And since we already have a default, like there's no way that none of these radio buttons will not be selected. Okay. And then once we figure out which one is selected, it's going to return the ID of that radio button. So if OK is going to be returned, we're going to get the OK ID, which is going to be option 15%. Okay. So now that we have the selected ID, we're going to need we're going to need a way to determine what the tip is going to be. So let's percentage right here. Val tip percentage. Gosh, if I can type. And let's actually go back one step. So let's make a when statement. When the selected ID is equal to, it should be R ID option 20%, then we are going to say the 0.20. When the selected option is R ID 18%, we are going to set the percentage to automatically be 0.18. In all other cases, default, we're just going to set the option percent to be 0.15. Now, this is a when statement. It works like a switch case in Java. We just need to, we can make this variable equal to the values in this when statement. So I'll make a variable called val and say tip percentage. And it could be any one of these values. See, it could be any one of these values, depending on what is actually selected. Okay. So if this first radio button is selected, then the ID is going to be this, and then the percentage is going to be this, and so on and so forth for the rest of them. So now, if we calculate the tip, let's make another variable and call it tip. And we're going to say, it's going to be the tip percentage times the cost. Percentage times cost. There we go. And that should give us exactly how much. So 10% of $10, it should give us $1, so on and so forth. That's exactly what we want to set the tip to be. There is one more thing that we have to double check though. In terms of the UI, we have to see if this the switch or toggle is on or off. If it's on, we want to round the value up to the nearest dollar. And if not, we have to round it down. So let's go ahead and do that. So right under the cost, let's go and create a variable called round up. And let's let it represent whether that element finding dot roundup switch is on, is checked. So it will return a Boolean if it's true. It will return or false, sorry. It will return true if it's selected and false if it's not selected. Okay. And then if it is selected, so if round up is selected, if you, for like people who want it more clear, you can write true or false. Oh, sorry, double equals, sorry, true. Honestly, it's fine just like this. This automatically means that it's true. You can just calculate the tip as a ceiling value of the tip itself. So basically a ceiling value. So if you have a value 1.0, it will take the ceiling value to 2. It will just round up to whatever the nearest whole number is. So, and the way we implement this in Kotlin is you do kotlin.math.ceil, and we can just say tip. And it's mad at me. Why is that? No, I want it as val. or maybe, oh, sorry, val is constant, var is not. All right, there we go. Great. And now the last thing that we have to do is just format the tip. So the way we do that is we go number, format, get currency interest instance. And then we want to say format. Oh boy. Okay, I'll just grab my charger real quick. 1 second.
Okay.
Should be all good now. Battery's charging. There we go. Okay, so we want to format the tip and make it look nice. So we don't want all these like trailing decimal places. And we can put this in a variable. So let's call it val formatted tip and make it equal to this formatted number, this formatted version of the tip. Okay. Now, I think the last step that we have really is to just display this tip value in our application. So if we go into our strings.xml, right now, our tip amount is set to this string. That doesn't really make any sense because we want a part of this to be dynamic. We want it to update with each new tip that we get. And so the way that we do this is we add in a %s, which acts as a placeholder for if you ever want to change that string, you just clarify what you want this %s to represent and update it as you want it to be updated. Okay. So now let's go back to the logic part. And let's set the text of tip result. Okay. So let's set the text for this %s. Okay. So first of all, let's go find that element that we want to display to. So if I go here, design, the element I want to display in is this one, right? And the ID is tip result. Okay, so let me go find that, finding dot. And then let text, and let's change the string part of it. So let's change the string. So it should be string tip amount. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm finding the string for this string. So tip amount is here. I'm finding it within the string resources. I see that there's a %s in there, and I'm finding that %s and I'm putting it in the logic. The %s, whatever I find in that, I want to set that to the text of in the activity main XML file. Okay, so I'm just displaying it properly. All right. Great. So that should be, oh, and we just want to add one more thing. We just wanted to say what value we want to set it to. So we want to set it to formatted tip. So we want this formatted tip to be replace that %s in the string. Great. And then that should be about it. Great. So now let's just run the app and take a look at what it looks like. Okay. There we go. Oops, that's not the one. That's tip time test. Let's run it. Let's go find out this error. So it's telling me that something is not found. Yeah, that's why. Okay, I'll try again. There we go. It's running. Now let's see if it works. Like, let's say $100 was our service and we want to not round up. Let's calculate the tip for that. Automatically, it's giving me $20. Now there are a couple bugs with this that we'll see as we go through. Like if I click on good and calculate again, but if I remove all these values and I click on calculate, it's going to crash. It's not going to work. It closed on its own. And there's a reason for that. These bugs are worked into the app itself so that we could see how to debug these things. So let's go ahead and try and debug like these little errors that we find, okay? So let's see here. If I open up logcat and I open up, yeah, there's the error. Ooh, this is scary. There we go. This is the error that we really want to look at. And I always dislike when they say fatal exception. I always think, oh my God, what happened?
Basically, what it's saying, the error right here is saying
there's an empty string. The reason is because we're trying to calculate a tip based on an empty string. So if we look at the main activity here, we're trying to say, hey, change this null object to a string. It's not going to work. It's going to be upset. It's going to be very angry because you can't change an empty string into a null object. And so the way we'd fix that is, let's see here. Translate this into either so we can translate it into, instead of translating it into a double, we can change this to null. And I think it should give that a shot. No, I don't think it should work. I take it back. I'm going to stop it. Huh, what's going on here? Nope. I'm actually going to change this. So if this is equal to null, is equal to null, I'm just going to return. I don't want to do anything. So now if I run it, it should automatically quit this function before anything happens. So let's take a look. So now there's nothing typed in there and I click calculate. Oh, it still crashed. Okay, so let's figure this out. And then take a break. Or in the presentation early, I think. Okay. So again, this is just talking about what would happen if the string field was empty. We'd get an error. All this, like this, we'd see the sea of red essentially. And this is the error, the empty string. So now, the way to fix this is what it's saying in calculate is change the line that declares the cost to double or null instead of calling to double. Okay. So let's change the cost variable. There we go. So basically, this is going to take that empty string and parse it either to double or to null if it is null. And then if it is null, if cost is null, and we're just going to end that function right then and there. So that way, if we run the app, and we have 0 text inside, it doesn't crash. Nothing happens. It just doesn't go into all the stuff where errors. Okay, let's debug one more thing there. Okay, so let's follow this step by step. Basically, what this is saying is that if you enter a value for a cost, so let's say $10 for a cost, and we click on calculate, and then we delete the cost, and then click on calculate, this still is like residual from the calculation before, and we want to get rid of that. So
the way we do that is,
if cost is equal to null, we want to basically reset that. We want to remove that as a whole. So let's just take out the whole text there of that element. So the element that we're going to be looking at right now, oopsie, yeah, let's go here, design. So for this element here, this tip result, we're going to set the text to be nothing. It's binding dot tip result dot text, and we're just going to make it an empty string like that. Okay, and then we're going to return. So that way, if we rerun the app, and we do exactly what we did before, we enter a value, press calculate, we remove the value and click on calculate, the tip doesn't show anymore, which is great because that's exactly what we want to do. So now if we enter another value again, click calculate, it will reappear. Okay, great. So I think that about covers it. We're done with pathway 1, essentially. There's more for things that you can do, of course, but for now you have the a functional. You have a functional app. You can put it on your portfolio or whatnot. There are more things that you can do with it in Pathway 2. So I think in Pathway 2, yeah, you can change the app theme, can change the icon, and then, just make it pretty, make it more refined, and so on and so forth. So I'll leave this to you guys. I think this would be a great spot to end the presentation. But I do recommend that you finish part 2 on your own time. And if you do need to look at previous study jams, it might be helpful in terms of understanding all the concepts that we're building on. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this thank you for listening to my presentation. If you do have any, my email in the chat. There we go. Oh, thank you. Thank you for attending. And there will be more study jams in the future, so please feel free to attend. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'll stay online for a little bit longer.
But I think that's good for
now. So thank you, everyone, and have a great Sunday.